You've been replaced in this role. Your abilities no longer provide any value here.
That's what Victor Hale, the new VP of Operations at Marion Axis Defense, told me. No handshake, no eye contact, just that line delivered while staring at his watch. 10 minutes earlier, I had finalized a $2.45 billion tactical systems deal with the Canadian Ministry of Defense. 8 months of negotiations, 27 flights, and 2 hospital visits from sheer exhaustion wiped away in a sentence. No congratulations, no bonus, just a 60% pay cut and a silent demotion to assistant. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Instead, I smiled because buried on page 86 of the master contract was clause 47B, and when I activated it, $2.45 billion vanished, and their systems froze. They didn't fire me. That would have left a paper trail. Instead, they erased me. Quietly, cleanly. When I returned to the 12th floor of Marion Axis Defense's Dallas HQ, my nameplate was already gone, had not been replaced, and was not misspelled, just missing. Where it once read Lucas Mercer, 43, Director Strategic Systems, the frosted glass outside my office stood blank, sterile, as if I'd never existed. My access badge still worked for now, but my inbox was wiped, my calendar deleted, and my parking space reassigned. Inside, the office I built from scratch had been stripped bare, except for one cardboard box labeled L. Mercer, Personal. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the vacant desk like it had betrayed me. 15 years, and now I was a ghost haunting my workspace. A junior staffer passed me in the hallway, balancing a tray of coffee, and did a double take. "Need help finding someone?" she asked genuinely. She didn't even recognize me. I gave a tight smile. "No," I said. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." They didn't lower me, they buried me. 5 floors down. Into a cubicle that smelled like printer toner and lemon disinfectant. No window, no phone, just a flickering light above and a sticky note on the screen. "We'll set you up by EOD J." And then came the final insult. I was nowhere on the newly printed company.org chart laminated and backlit in the hallway. Not at the top, not in footnotes, not even in historical project teams. My role had been given to Victor's protege, a 2-year-old fast tracker named Riley Gray. Same title, same seat, same deals. Except it wasn't her name written on clause 47B. It was mine. The first time I saw Riley Gray take my seat, she didn't even hesitate. Monday morning, 9:02 a.m. I had just grabbed a stale coffee from the break room on the 7th floor when I passed the executive wing again out of habit. My old hallway, my old pace, and there she was, sitting confidently behind the desk I had designed, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too sharp, already on a video call. At 28, Riley was all speed and surface. I'd mentored her briefly during a summer internship 3 years ago. She'd barely made it through the integration modeling module, but she smiled a lot and made good eye contact. Victor must have liked that. They always do. She had no operational background, no client oversight history, no late nights in Frankfurt debugging military-grade telemetry for cross-border compliance. But she had a LinkedIn profile that said Global Systems Visionary, and apparently that was enough. The kicker. The pitch deck she presented was mine repackaged in a new font, with my name stripped from every slide. I recognized every number, every flowchart. She had even kept the file name format I invented, SDS, P2, int logic final, V5. I walked away before I could hear more. Not because I was angry, not yet, but because something deeper had cracked inside me. This wasn't a handoff. It was a deletion. Later that afternoon, someone from internal marketing dropped off a stack of folders at my cubicle. "For the leadership summit," she chirped. "Can you get these to Riley upstairs?" She didn't even blink when she said it. I nodded slowly and took the stack. The folders were heavy gloss-coated, trimmed in company blue. On the top one, a tab stuck out just slightly. I tugged it open. Inside was a revised slide deck titled, Final Integration Report, presented by Riley Gray. And there it was, slide 6. A photo from the final signing in Ottawa. I remembered that day. We were exhausted but relieved, still holding champagne flutes. I was front and center, but someone had drawn a red slash across my face. A literal red X. I stared at it for a long time. Not in anger, not in shock, but in absolute clarity. They hadn't just replaced me. They were betting no one would remember I was ever there. You don't build a $2.45 billion deal by playing it safe. You make it by giving up everything else. And I had. For 15 years, I gave Marion Access Defense every hour, every flight, every missed anniversary, every version of myself I didn't have time to become. I remember one night the 5th straight week of back-to-back flights between Dallas, Toronto, and Ottawa. I collapsed in my hotel bathroom, still in a suit, my skin burning with fever, dehydrated, exhausted. I called the front desk for help, and I shook my head when the EMTs asked if I needed to cancel meetings. Just give me a saline drip, I said. I've got a 9 a.m. with Transport Command. I was 43 and bargaining with my health for a project milestone. There were mornings I took investor calls from a terminal lounge in Montreal, still wearing the same blazer from the night before. Nights I reviewed counterparty risk clauses on the floor of a budget hotel in Winnipeg, the glow of my laptop the only thing keeping me awake. I missed my daughter's first piano recital. I forgot my mother's last Thanksgiving. She called me from her hospital bed in Austin, trying to pretend she wasn't disappointed. I told her the contract was almost done, that we were close. She said she understood, but I could still hear the fracture in her voice. 3 months ago, Lock Systems, one of Marion's most significant competitors, offered me a senior VP position, complete control of global integrations, stock options, my team. I turned them down. I told them I was loyal, because, at the time, I still believed loyalty meant something. Instead, I stayed. I went back to my windowless cubicle. I kept reviewing the final integration framework. I kept pushing toward the signing, and I kept quiet about one thing, Clause 47B. It wasn't part of the standard contract. Over dinner in Ottawa, I had written it myself after a client director leaned across the table and said, "If you're not overseeing this, we walk." So I built it in, quietly, with no fanfare. A single line of insurance, not for the company, but for the deal itself. They didn't know it yet, but when they erased me, they also erased their only safeguard. Clause 47B wasn't flashy. It wasn't buried in legal jargon or hidden behind annexes. It was one sentence, written in plain language near the end of the operational handover section. If Lucas Mercer, 43, is reassigned, removed, or replaced, the client reserves the right to void the agreement in full. No one questioned it, not legal, Victor, or even Riley, because they never thought I mattered that much. They assumed deals were about logos and signatures. They didn't understand this one was about trust. And when they cut me out, they triggered the one line I'd built to be unignorable. The moment I knew the deal wasn't really about Marion Access Defense came halfway through a blizzard in Munich. It was late January. The final stage of negotiations had pushed everyone to the brink, legal teams feuding over indemnity clauses, engineers disputing sensor protocols, compliance buried in export control nightmares. I was holding it all together with duct tape and caffeine. The deal was unraveling. That Friday night, I received a message on Signal. Dinner. No Agenda. 7:30. Kleines Haus am Platz. Just you. It was from Martin Berenger, the client's executive director. No assistants. No board members. Just him. I hesitated. We still had 4 unresolved provisions and a military handover document in draft. But something in the brevity of his words told me it wasn't about documents. I arrived a few minutes early. The restaurant was quiet, all dark wood, candlelight, and the sound of silverware against linen. He was already seated, no wine, no phone, just a folded napkin. When I sat down, he leaned in, his voice low. "Lucas," he said, "I'm not here as an executive tonight. I'm here as someone who's had a billion-dollar contract fall apart because someone like you got replaced midstream without warning." He told me the story, their last partner, their most significant loss. A disaster caused by someone being yanked off a project with no explanation and replaced by someone who didn't know the terrain. "It set us back 3 years," he said. "We're not signing with Marion, we're signing with you." And at that moment, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a cog, a placeholder, or a salary line. I felt seen, respected, vital. I promised him I would see it through, every phase, every mile, every late night. Back in my hotel room that evening, a note had been slipped under the door. Heavy cardstock, handwritten cursive. "To the one who earned our confidence through clarity, not title. We don't forget those who carry weight quietly. Monsieur Berenger." I kept it folded in the back of my notebook. Marion never saw it. They wouldn't have understood it anyway. No one expected me to show up on Monday after the replacement. Not after the demotion. Not after the erasure. They probably figured I'd disappear in protest, send a bitter email, storm out with a box under one arm. But at 8 a.m. sharp, I walked through the glass doors of Marion Axis Defense's Dallas headquarters, blazer pressed, hair combed back, expression unreadable. The same man. The same building. A different purpose. Riley passed my cubicle that morning once. She didn't speak. She looked sideways as if unsure whether to nod or ignore me. I gave her nothing. No reaction. No bitterness. Just silence. Across the hall, Victor's door remained open, but he never once addressed me. No meeting. No debrief. I wasn't angry. I was calculating. Instead of job hunting or drafting long-winded complaints, I began reaching out quietly to old colleagues, past collaborators, procurement leads, and 2 former Marion execs now working elsewhere. I didn't ask for favors. I asked questions. Would you still need aerospace compliance oversight next quarter? Are you still managing post-integration workflows in your Montreal division? How's morale looking on your European tech team? I wasn't planting seeds. I was testing the soil. Most people responded with curiosity, some with interest. But one conversation stood out. During my Thursday lunch break, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Washington, D.C. area code. "Lucas Mercer?" a calm voice asked. "Yes." This is Dana Whitaker, contract law specialist. I just reviewed the final agreement tied to the Marion Yukon Systems deal. I believe you authored Clause 47B. I did. There was a pause. Then she said, "It's airtight, clear intent, enforceable under U.S. and Canadian jurisdiction. It's the most strategic clause in the document. They didn't even know what you gave them." I leaned back in my chair. That flickering office light buzzed overhead. But in my chest clarity, they didn't just erase me. They overlooked the only person who knew how the deal functioned. That night, I stayed late. I wasn't working, just watching. The office hummed around me. People moved as if nothing had shifted. But I knew. I sat under that dim light, one hand resting gently on the drawer holding the original signed contract. Still with my ink. Still with my initials. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tip them off. Because power, when it's real, doesn't shout. It waits. Quietly, confidently, until it's needed. I didn't go to Ottawa. Riley did. She left on a Monday morning, strutting through the private terminal at Dallas Executive Airport with a Marion-issued briefcase I'd picked out for senior travel years ago. First-class boarding pass, fresh blazer, all confidence. I heard she even smiled through security, like she'd earned it. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Yukon Systems' global headquarters sits on Parliament Hill, in a building I knew better than some apartments I'd lived in. I knew which elevator was stuck between floors. I knew the assistant who hated acronyms. I knew the espresso in the third-floor lounge was the only one worth drinking. And I knew that my name wasn't just on the signature page, it was woven into the bones of the deal. At 4:42 p.m., Marion Axis Defense's leadership received an email from Yukon's legal department. No warning, no courtesy call. Just a cold, precise subject line. Contract status immediate contingency execution. Clause 47B. The body was even shorter. By Clause 47B, the contract between Yukon Systems and Marion Axis Defense is rendered null and void effective immediately due to unauthorized personnel reassignment. Miss Riley Gray is not recognized as a qualified substitute. All obligations are dissolved. No further meetings will be held. The message CC'd Victor, Riley, the entire executive board, corporate counsel, and unintentionally, I think, a press contact from PR. Within 10 minutes, it had been forwarded at least 50 times. By 5:07 p.m., someone from HR walked past my cubicle, holding a folder and whispering into a headset. No one looked me in the eye. Not because they were ashamed, they were panicked. A junior analyst named Chris, one of the few who'd worked under me, walked by wide-eyed. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The story was spreading. Someone in communications tried to turn it into a light internal memo, a pivot strategy, draft about a realignment of objectives. It never saw daylight. I heard Victor had the entire thread deleted within the hour. No mentions of Clause 47B. No acknowledgement I existed. But it was too late. I didn't post online. I didn't release a statement. I didn't need to. Because by 7:30 p.m., my inbox began to light up with subject lines they hadn't even meant to send to me. Need clarification was Clause 47B enforceable. Client contact requesting immediate explanation. Who was responsible for the operational continuity clause? None of them addressed me directly, but I was in every sentence. Riley didn't show up the next day. Victor didn't call me in. But I heard someone crying in the executive bathroom. Maybe it was her. Perhaps it wasn't. By 9 a.m., the 11th floor, where the lights are usually too bright and the voices too measured, buzzed with something sharp and disorganized. The walk between offices wasn't casual anymore. It was quick, controlled, panicked. In a locked boardroom, they scrambled. Victor blamed legal for not catching the clause. Legal blamed under resourcing. Someone tried to float the idea that I had planted it maliciously. And then around 11:40 a.m., according to someone who still owed me a favor, Elaine Dorset, board member and former compliance chief, raised her hand. "Let's stop pretending this was an oversight," she said. "I was in the room 3 weeks ago when Victor said, and I quote, 'Lucas is making leadership look weak. It's time to shrink his visibility.'" Silence. Not because they disagreed, but because someone had finally said it. I wasn't in that room, but my silence was, and it was louder than all of them. By 2:15 p.m., the 11th floor felt like it was vibrating. Phones rang nonstop, voices clipped and urgent behind half-closed doors. No one made eye contact in the elevators anymore. Every conference room was booked, and every hallway was overheard. Inside Boardroom B, the atmosphere had shifted from damage control to blame assignment. Red-faced and defensive, Victor Hale insisted that legal had failed to flag Clause 47B. He claimed it was an irrelevant formality, a non-binding redundancy. He even suggested Yukon would eventually return to the table, that this was a negotiation tactic. But the numbers didn't agree. Marion's stock was already dipping, and word had leaked someone at Yukon had forwarded the termination email to an investor group. That group had questions. Victor deflected, pivoted, and finally, in one last grasp for control, tried to pin it on me. He claimed I had overstepped my authority by including clauses without board approval, that I'd acted out of bitterness. That was when Elaine Dorset, 62, leaned forward and ended it. "Victor," she said, voice calm but cutting, "you told this room, and I quote, 'Lucas is making leadership look weak. We need to minimize his presence before the signing. The room went still. No one denied it. No one defended him. They all looked down at their tablets, hands, and the carpet. I wasn't in that boardroom, but what I had written was. And in the end, it spoke louder than any title ever could. It was 9:15 a.m. on a Wednesday when my phone buzzed just as I refilled a chipped coffee mug in the 7th floor break room. The number was unfamiliar, but the Manhattan area code caught my attention. I hesitated, thumb hovering. Then I picked up. "Lucas Mercer?" the voice asked, smooth, steady, no hesitation. "Yes. This is Elliot Sharp, Executive Director at Lock Systems. We spoke a few months ago. I believe you said the timing wasn't quite right back then." I remembered. He offered me the Senior Vice President of Global Integration role with full authority, stock, a private office in D.C., complete relocation, and my team pick. And I had said no because I was loyal to Marion, because I still believed loyalty was a two-way street. "Well," he continued, "we're hoping the timing is right now, and we'd like to revisit the offer, with a few adjustments." I strolled back to my desk as he spoke. My hands were warm from the mug, but my chest was colder than steel. Jonah didn't waste time. He laid it out: double base salary, expanded equity, and a new position, Chief Systems Officer, with complete oversight of strategic architecture across 3 continents. A permanent seat at the executive table. And one detail that made me stop. A dedicated floor in Locke's new D.C. headquarters, just 4 blocks from Marion's building. I didn't respond right away. "There's one more thing," he added, voice softening. "This wasn't just our idea. We were encouraged to reach back out." "By who?" I asked, already knowing. "Martin Barringer. He called you a non-negotiable asset. The Yukon deal fell apart because you weren't in it, and he doesn't want the next one without you." I stared at the scuffed wall of my cubicle. I'd sat quietly in the same spot while Marion tried to write me out of my work. And now here I was, not chasing and not pitching or asking. I was being asked. I took a slow breath. "Jonah," I said carefully, "I appreciate the offer, but before we talk numbers again, I have a condition." "Of course. I choose my team. Every hire under my division, especially post-deal integration, goes through me. No exceptions." A pause. "Done," he said. "Anything else?" I opened the drawer. I pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in weeks, the one from Munich. The letter was still inside. "One more thing," I said. "This time, I don't just want to sign deals. I want to own the outcome from negotiation to implementation to renewal." There was no hesitation. "You'll have it." Walking into the 23rd floor of Lock Systems' new D.C. headquarters felt surreal, just 4 blocks from Marion Axis Defense. Polished marble floors, floor-to-ceiling glass, the Potomac glinting in the distance. It was the space you don't enter unless you belong there. And now I did. 3 months ago, I was in a flickering cubicle, erased from my title, scrubbed from the org chart, watching the company I gave 15 years to collapse under its arrogance. Now I was stepping into a boardroom lined in walnut and steel, leather folders waiting across the table, the weight of something irreversible hanging in the air. Zama deal, Zama client, different company, different terms. I took my seat at the head of the table. Across from me sat Martin Barringer, no longer in negotiation mode. He was calm, respected, waiting. Elliot Sharp leaned in. "Ready when you are," he said, sliding the agreement across the table. I looked down at the top page. Contract value, $3.62 billion. Client, Yukon Systems. Vendor, Lock Systems. Global Oversight Executive, Lucas Mercer. There it was, not just my name, but my role, explicitly outlined in the final clause. All post-deal operations, strategic oversight, integration phases, and client reporting must be managed directly by Lucas Mercer, age 43. Substitution is not permitted under any circumstance. They weren't leaving anything to chance. And honestly, neither was I. This time, I wasn't sharing authorship. I wasn't signing as someone in the middle of a chain of command. I wasn't the guy behind the scenes. I was the name above the outcome. I was the signature that made the entire structure operational. I lifted the pen smooth, heavy, weighted and signed. Not with a vengeance. With authority. I didn't check Marion's reaction. I didn't need to. But I got a text from someone still stuck inside. Someone I'd once trained during a midnight integration sprint years ago. Riley saw the announcement mid-huddle. Froze mid-sentence. Victor read it in his office. No one said a word. The press release went live at 10:30 a.m. sharp. Lock Systems secure a $3.62 billion defense contract with Yukon, former Marion executive to lead global strategy. Within 30 minutes, Bloomberg picked it up. Reuters followed. I didn't trend, but I didn't need to. I wasn't seeking attention. I was claiming space. No one from Marion reached out. No apology, no congratulations. That was fine. I wasn't waiting for closure. The ink was enough. Because this time, I didn't just return. I rose. And I didn't rise through the noise. I rose in silence, the kind that rewrites everything. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped out onto the top floor of Lock Systems DC. Headquarters, the same building I'd entered in silence weeks earlier. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't the hush of humiliation. It was the quiet that followed clarity. A kind of stillness only earned after you've survived the noise. The hallway ahead glowed with soft, indirect lighting. The air smelled like leather and cedar. My name was engraved into the glass panel beside the boardroom entrance. Lucas Mercer, Chief Systems Officer. Just below it, in smaller lettering, Global Oversight and Strategic Integration. 3 months ago, Marion Axis Defense tried to erase me. They failed. On my way to the boardroom, I passed a media screen in the executive lounge. The volume was muted, but I caught the headline scrolling across the ticker. Marion announces 200 job cuts. Amid Yukon collapse, CEO Victor Hale steps down. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. I felt release, the exhale that follows years of holding your breath, the slow, satisfying return of weight to your name. Victor had bet on silence, meaning surrender. Riley had mistaken absence for irrelevance. They had measured leadership in noise and showmanship. But legacy isn't built on flash. Legacy is built on what survives without applause. My phone buzzed as I reached the boardroom doors. I checked the screen. Riley Gray. One message. Can we talk? I think I made a mistake. M. I stared at the text for a second. Then I locked the screen and slid it into my bag. No reply. No explanation. There was nothing left to say. Inside, the boardroom was already half full. Executives in tailored suits and composed faces looked up and nodded. The final contract, a global supply and integration agreement worth $3.1 billion, sat before me. Different continent, different scope, same expectations. On the last page, a new clause had been added, not by me, but by Yukon themselves. All strategic execution must remain under the direct authority of Lucas Mercer. Oversight is non-transferable. They weren't taking risks anymore. Neither was I. I signed, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I had finally fully stepped into what I had always been building. And as I did, I realized something. This wasn't about Marion, or Victor, or Riley. It wasn't even about the clause. It was about the space between being replaced and being remembered. About the power of choosing restoration over revenge. Because I could have made noise. I could have leaked the clause. I could have dragged them into court or lit the whole system on fire. But I didn't. I waited. I wrote. I remembered. And when the time came, I didn't yell. I signed. If you've ever been overlooked and watched someone with half your experience get credit for work you built in exhaustion, you know what this moment feels like. And if you're still sitting in silence, wondering if you matter, let me tell you, you do. They may try to minimize your presence. steal your title, or even erase your name. But they can't erase your weight. Not if you carry it with clarity. Not if you let your work speak louder than their noise. Because someday, maybe not today or next quarter, but someday, they'll need your signature. And when that moment comes, don't shout, just sign. I used to think power looked like corner offices, loud voices, and signed bonuses. But now I know real power is quiet. It's measured in the moments you choose not to react, in the restraint to hold what you know until the timing is right. When Marion tried to erase me, they didn't just underestimate my role and how deep the roots of good work go. You can rip someone's title from a door but can't undo integrity, discipline, or trust earned in silence. That's the part they never understood. This story isn't about revenge. It's about remembering who you are when no one else does. It's about letting your value echo louder than your nameplate. I didn't fight to be seen. I didn't beg to be heard. I just waited until the right people asked the right question, and then I answered by signing my name to something bigger, cleaner, stronger. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt discarded, invisible, or replaced, I want you to take this with you. Your silence is not your weakness, it's your strategy. Let them overlook you. Let them assume you're done. Because when they forget and fall apart, you won't have to raise your voice. You'll have the one thing they can't replace: the truth. And when the time comes, you won't need an audience. You'll need a pen. That's how you reclaim your space, not by screaming, but by signing. Quiet, clear, unforgettable,